Hello, family, and welcome to another episode of Role Model Makers Experts Cafe. I'm your host, Dr. L, the Parent Whisperer, and today with me, I have an amazing lady with me. She has been in our community, and she is going to be speaking on our next Health, Wealth, Wisdom Summit. So, if you haven't been to one of our events, and if you're lucky enough to be watching this in time, please make sure that you join us. And it is my pleasure to introduce to you guys Miss Maria Belanic. And she has been a tremendous person within our community. I love how she shows up, and I thought that you guys should stop multitasking and listen to what she's got to say. Maria, thank you so much for being here. Can you tell our audience members a little bit more about yourself and how you got involved doing what you do? And then we'll go from there.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Dr. Al. And I always appreciate the generous spirit that you have because I know your light definitely shines bright and you're here to serve, right? And that's the community that you've built. And I totally love that. And that's what brought me on board, of course. And basically, what also brought me on is about the messaging. I mean, for me, it's about normalizing the grief and mental wellness conversation, to stop the stigma around it and to make it an open conversation. And the reason I got into it is because, of course, I've had a profound loss. My oldest son had passed away, and we feel sort of in this regression sort of attitude where we're hiding. We're not able to use our voice to express what we're feeling or even going through. No one really understands. And rather than comforting us, they give us messages of, you're stuck. When are you going to get over it and move on? And I think even as a parent, that is so hard. And that's part of the reason I joined the community is because as parents, especially mothers, we are hard on ourselves. We constantly berate ourselves. You know, if our child does something, we're not good enough, we're not this. I mean, it always seems that it's the mom to blame. I don't know why, but it's the mother. And I truly believe that because of this, mothers aren't giving themselves enough compassion for what they're doing. They're not speaking to themselves kindly. And it is causing a lot of stress, overwhelm, and of course, mental well being, which is conversations that I, of course, want to have out in the open.
I love this topic because ever since we were kids, we are shielded and sheltered from actually being exposed to these things. And as a result, we never get the opportunity to process, to practice, and get good at it. And so shame, disappointment, loss, failure are all part of normal life. And when we actually try to shield others from it, this is one of those things that ends up not serving them and not serving us. So I love the fact that you're bringing this and you're bringing it in a fashion that is so supportive, especially of a group of people that are so giving and so central to bringing the family together and communicating. So tell me a little bit more about how you got involved with this and like why this is so near and dear to your heart.
As I mentioned, after my son passed away, I lived in 10 years being stuck, like where I always go, it's my limbo years. It's a whole blur. I had no idea what happened. I was going through the motions and really hiding behind a facade where it was, I'm living life, but not really being fully present. And I don't want anyone else to lose years of their life where they look at it and they go, I don't know, how did 10 years go by so quickly? I mean, life goes by fast anyways. But to have 10 years where you feel like you've been asleep, I think no one should be able to have to go through that if they don't have to. Um, and part of it too is sometimes a lot of people don't really understand. I mean, we have grief every single day. I mean, there's so many different types of grief. I was talking to a woman the other day, and she made a mention which really made sense. A child dropping their ice cream cone, that is grief to a child. right? Like when we look at it in the simplest of forms, that to that child, that all of a sudden, like they lost something. And yet, as you said, what do we do? Oh, here, let's go get another one. Or we get angry at the child. Like we're not having that conversation of saying, oh, wow, you dropped your ice cream cone. What do you feel like? I mean, I'm not saying that we have to go delving into these hard feelings. It's just acknowledging, saying, oh, wow, you lost your ice cream cone. Like, do you feel sad? And that's probably it, because that's what they're feeling. And so I think it's to make it simplified. And just so that way we acknowledge what's happening around us rather than trying to sugarcoat everything.
So I want to kind of go back again to, you said 10 years went by. So describe for me a little bit more about that moment of awakening that you realize that 10 years has gone by and you've lived a life that ideally you would have liked it to have been different. So what actually sparked that change for you?
What sparked the change is I always go, I had a moment. I think with grief, we're taught to run away from it, right? Like we're supposed to hide our feelings. It didn't happen, and you kind of had this feeling of what's wrong with me? Why am I keeping on these emotions? And what I came to realize is that when we are witnessing deep grief, it's because we have this unending love, this infinity of love. And what I came to realize is that grief wasn't going to go anywhere. It was going to stay with me forever. And I know that may sound daunting to people because it's as soon as we say the word grief, everyone has this image of someone constantly being in turmoil and despair, crying, and, you know, sort of like what the movies portray this deep grief is. I call myself a bereaved mom. Now that means I can still have joy. And it was from that choice of when I chose to say grief is staying with me, it was like a burden had been lifted. So it's rather instead of running away from it, I started to lean into it and embrace it and kind of going, I will always miss my son. That's not going to change. And I'm not going to hide it anymore.
This is really important because nowadays with social media and selfies and people are always documenting and recording these happy moments that sometimes are artificial, fake. They're not or if they're not artificial and fake, they're not the whole person. What you just described is that, the thing that makes us whole is not just the happy moments, but this other half as well. And that becomes part of your identity. And when you accept that, then you're accepting yourself and
Mhm.
it's okay to have the feelings. So it's really powerful. Um, very cool. So what are some of the signs, symptoms, things that you kind of land on your doorstep? What are some of the things that you see as a common challenge for moms, for people who are trying to incorporate what has happened to them into their life and be able to move forward, and they're having challenge difficulty?
Well, what the struggle is sometimes for a lot of us, I mean, whether we're in grief or not, we carry a lot of regret and guilt, right? There's always the aspect of what could I have done differently? What should I have done? I always go, even for mine, sometimes, which is going to, for some people, are just going to go, what the heck is she thinking? So my son had cancer for 11 years. He had a blood cancer. And I mean, so for 11 years, that's what we dealt with, the roller coaster of his blood cancer and the chaos from there. And after he passed away, the thought that came is, why didn't I find a cure? I was his mom. What was I doing those 11 years? Like, never mind that we have doctors and researchers and all of that. It's like, I was the mom. I am, and sometimes as parents, especially mothers, we feel that we can breathe life. We gave birth. So, of course, we can breathe life into our child. And we're super
Yeah.
moms, so we're supposed to know everything.
Yeah.
And so that guilt, which our brains, it isn't true, and yet our brains bake it that this is a fact. when in fact it's untrue. So a lot of times we are dealing, our brains are giving us messages that we could not even change this, but our brains want to change the aspect of it because we want to feel that we had control. And I think the scary part is realizing that we actually have no control, right? As human beings, we feel like, yeah, I got control of everything. I can do this. And when we realize that, oh, we really don't, it's kind of like scary. And sometimes we have to lean into our fears.
Okay, so we just went from the internal sadness to a feeling of anxiety that you're not in control. So how do we deal with this?
And this is it. And this is why I have the 5 pillars of care that I use. And it really starts with acknowledging where you're feeling. Because if we don't acknowledge or recognize it, we don't know that it's happening. And really, sometimes it's about how, once we recognize it, and instead of berating ourselves, just kind of sort of say, is it true or is it not? I mean, in my case, is it true? Could I have found the cure for cancer? Well, I would have had to be like a superhuman, like even knowing more about the doctors and the researchers and all the years that they've dealt with it. Um, and sometimes it is about taking it to the ridiculous. However, sometimes I always go when we voice it, then we can really acknowledge what we're saying. Because a lot of times when we're keeping it silent and it's ruminating in our mind, it becomes bigger and bigger. And when we voice it, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that isn't true.
Actually, that exercise that you just mentioned, voicing it, is just great role modeling for kids to be able to express their emotions accurately and really hear themselves talk about their feelings and be able to process it. So that in itself is like a big tip, guys. So if you weren't paying attention, stop, go back and kind of review the last minute or two because that is a very powerful tool to be able to voice it. So got it. All right. So what's next?
And it's just going through, I mean, for me, really, it's about hearing someone else. Because a lot of times we feel that we're not seen. Um, and sometimes our emotions don't have any place to go. So it depends on the person of what is right for them, whether it's journaling, whether it's taking a walk in nature. I mean, we fit it into that, but it's also about giving yourself compassion. Like, how do you speak to yourself with kindness, with love? That I think sometimes is really lacking in the sense of, because a lot of times how we grew up also plays a role in how we treat our own selves, right? So I don't deal
So
with limiting beliefs because that I'll leave that to the other experts,
got it.
right? I'm
Well,
here
but
just about
yeah,
educating.
yeah. So there's this part about actually giving some room, some space for your feelings to exist, voicing them, hearing yourself and process it. So that part of it is definitely a really big part. And then the second part of it is what do I do with this now that I've got it? And do I accept it? Do I reject it? And self-love becomes a big part of that, basically, what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. And it's also about how do we release the guilt, the regrets, right? It's so we have to have a way of releasing rather than staying in, because a lot of times what we keep silent, what we regress shows up in our bodies as a physical ailment and mental wellness. So
Very
everything ties up. I always go, it's a mind, body, spirit connection because we can't say it's just the emotions. I mean, I prefer to say it's all of it because a lot of times when we just focus on one, I always go think of it as not so much, I guess it's a pie sort of thing when you're doing the ingredients. If you're missing one ingredient, it's not exactly going to come the same. You can change things up. However, everything has to have to work together, to have, and I don't even like to word the word balance. I always like to say it's an ebb and flow because it's like with everything else in life. Some days you're going to feel like, okay, I got this handled. And other days you're just going to feel like I'm so drained and fatigued. And to recognize and acknowledge and be aware that that's what's going to happen. Because as you say, I think with social media, we usually see all the time of everyone being lifted up in spirits. And yes, that is great. However, is that the whole life 24/7, 7 days a week?
It's
We
not.
all ebb and flow. And I think that's something that we need to recognize also. And also, part of that is how do we evolve? Um, I know people in business like to use growth mindset. Well, I like to say, well, as we evolve, we find our pockets of peace, right? Rather than moments of peace, it's our pockets of peace. And that's going to look different for each of us because what's going to give me joy may not give you joy. I always use that. For me, a simple act of joy is just having a really good cup of coffee, and really enjoying it. That's how simple that it can be. Or just looking at the flowers and noticing all the different shades of pink, of blue, right? Someone else I was speaking to had said, because I live on the West Coast, and she had went, I never saw the many shades of green. And I'm going, yeah, that sometimes is just being present and looking at things in a different way.
I can definitely see the opening for the rabbit hole, and this goes pretty deep, and I love it. I love like that. This is a journey that I love to do on any given day. I'm all about personal development, understanding how my background, where I grew up, and where it leads me. What are my propensities towards certain habits, certain things? So these are all factors that come into that evolution and those pockets of peace you were talking about. So, um, so how can people find out more about what you do and connect with you and take this journey down the rabbit hole together with you, as opposed to tumbling down on their own?
Oh, thank you for that. Yes. So people can reach me at hope@mariabelanic.com. That's my email. And my website is mariabelanic.com. Makes it super easy.
Guys, I've gathered a whole bunch of information and more resources from Maria, and I'm going to go ahead and put that in the description box below. So make sure you take a moment right now, stop multitasking, go down there and check out the resources. This serves two purposes. Number one, for you to actually receive the information that she has so generously given us. Secondly, and this is probably even more important, role modeling the behavior that you don't have to have all the answers, that it is okay to reach out for help is a very important lesson that we need to teach our kids. And by going to the description, doing this, and sharing that process, that journey with your family, that is a great gift that you can give them. So make sure that you connect, you role model the behavior, that the world is not a scary place, and there are good people interested in making the world a better place. So connect with Maria. If you haven't already done so, connect with our channel as well by clicking like and subscribe as well. And together we can all grow and we can all have a happier journey through this life together. Maria, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today. Any final words for our audience members before we finish today?
Well, thank you, Dr. L. Par just to be kind to yourself. I think that is on a daily basis. We all do things, we all feel dirt in certain ways, but always have compassion and kindness for yourself because you matter, right? Who you are matters.
And who you are matters. I like both of those. So thank you very much. Well said. All right, guys, until next time. Cheers.